Picture a neighborhood on its knees. Homes abandoned, streets crumbling, dreams fading into ash. Now imagine a 16-year-old kid, mocked and overlooked, tinkering in his garage with an invention that could change it all. But when a ferocious fire roars through, threatening to burn everything he's fought for, will his creation save his community or be consumed in the flames? This is the epic tale of Ethan Caldwell, a kid who bet everything on a wild idea and faced impossible odds to save his neighborhood. You're not going to want to miss how this unfolds. Stick with me. Welcome to Willow Creek, a small corner of upstate New York, 2018. It's the kind of place where kids used to race bikes until the streetlights flickered on, where neighbors swapped stories at the annual block party, and where life felt simple, even sweet. But by the time Ethan Caldwell was 16, Willow Creek was a shadow of itself. The textile factory, the heartbeat of the local economy, had shut down 3 years prior. Jobs evaporated, families packed up, and for sale signs littered the streets like gravestones. The laughter of kids was replaced by the creak of empty porches, and the community's spirit was slipping away. Ethan was an unremarkable kid on the surface, pale, gangly, with a tangle of sandy hair and glasses that slid down his nose no matter how often he pushed them up. He wasn't the quarterback or the class clown. You'd find him in his garage, knee-deep in wires, circuit boards, and scavenged junk, tinkering until the stars faded. His mom, Lisa, used to say he was born clutching a screwdriver. His dad, Tom, a gruff ex-factory worker, grumbled about the junk Ethan hauled home from scrapyards and thrift stores. To Ethan, though, every rusted bolt and cracked circuit was a piece of a puzzle waiting to be solved. Ethan's knack for inventing showed early. At 10, he built a remote-controlled car that could climb stairs, leaving his friends dumbfounded. By 13, he'd rigged his bike with a solar-powered light that never needed charging. But Ethan wasn't just messing around, he wanted to fix things, to make a mark. In a place like Willow Creek, there was plenty to fix. The other kids called him Gearhead, a nickname dripping with mockery for the boy who'd rather talk to machines than people. Adults were no kinder, rolling their eyes at his hobbies and dismissing him as a kid with big dreams and zero practical know-how. Ethan didn't let it stop him. He had a vision, and it was about to shake the world. The problem was glaring. Willow Creek's power grid was a relic, coughing up blackouts like clockwork, especially during summer storms. Small businesses struggled to keep the lights on, and families drowned in electricity bills they couldn't pay. Ethan noticed something else: vacant lots and rooftops bathed in sunlight all day long. Solar power was the obvious fix, but commercial solar systems cost a fortune, far beyond the reach of a crumbling neighborhood. That's when Ethan's big idea hit. The Suncrafter, a low-cost, modular solar generator built from recycled materials that anyone could assemble and maintain. The Suncrafter was no ordinary solar panel, it was a lifeline. Ethan's design leaned on discarded laptop batteries, scrap metal, and other cheap components to slash costs. Each unit could power a small home for pennies compared to commercial systems. If it worked, it could bring reliable, affordable electricity to Willow Creek, and maybe further. But Ethan was one kid, working out of a garage stuffed with second-hand tools and no budget. Worse, the city had just dropped a bombshell. Parts of Willow Creek were slated for rezoning into an industrial zone. If the neighborhood didn't turn things around in 3 months, bulldozers would roll in to replace homes with warehouses. Ethan's first shot to pitch the Suncrafter came at a community meeting, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. Picture a 16-year-old in a faded hoodie standing in a dingy community center packed with weary, skeptical adults. He'd spent weeks perfecting his prototype, running tests, and practicing his speech until his voice cracked. But as he stepped to the front, the room buzzed with disbelief. He started talking, his words tumbling out too fast, explaining how the Suncrafter could cut energy costs and save their homes. The response was brutal. "A kid's science fair project?" sneered Mr. Hargrove, a former factory foreman. "What's next? A lemonade stand to save the town?" Laughter erupted, sharp and mocking. Another neighbor, Mrs. Carter, leaned back and muttered, "He's wasting our time. We need real solutions, not fantasies." Ethan's face burned, his hands trembling as he clutched his prototype. Even his dad, sitting in the back, looked away, embarrassed. The room felt like it was closing in, every chuckle a dagger to Ethan's confidence. He stammered through his explanation. How the Suncrafter used recycled batteries, how it could power a home through a blackout. But the crowd's eyes glazed over. To them, he was just a kid, out of his depth, chasing a pipe dream. Then, a voice cut through the noise. Mrs. Delgado, the 70-year-old matriarch of Willow Creek, stood up. She was a force, tough, no-nonsense, with a stare that could silence a room. "Let the kid try," she said, her voice steady. "We're out of options, and you all know it." The laughter died. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, then nodded. It wasn't trust, it was desperation. Ethan left with a flicker of hope and a crushing deadline. 3 months to prove his invention, or Willow Creek was done. Building the Suncrafter was a nightmare. The first prototype sparked and burst into flames, filling the garage with acrid smoke. Ethan coughed through the haze, his heart sinking as weeks of work went up in flames. The second prototype short-circuited during a test, frying its circuits with a pop that echoed like defeat. Each failure felt like a personal betrayal, chipping away at Ethan's resolve. He barely slept, his eyes bloodshot as he pored over online forums teaching himself electrical engineering concepts that would stump most adults. His dad's skepticism didn't help. "You're in over your head, Ethan," Tom said one night, tossing a wrench onto the workbench. "This isn't a game." The word stung, but Ethan kept going, driven by a stubborn fire he couldn't explain. He enlisted Mia, his best friend, a whip-smart girl who'd moved to Willow Creek a year earlier. Mia was a coding genius and, more importantly, the only person who believed in Ethan without question. Together, they refined the design, scavenged parts from junkyards, and worked until their hands were raw. After weeks of setbacks, they cracked it. The Suncrafter worked. It was a mess, duct tape, mismatched screws, and wires that looked like a bird's nest, but it powered a small fridge for 12 hours straight. They tested it at Mrs. Delgado's house. When her lights stayed on during a blackout, she grabbed Ethan in a bear hug, her voice thick with gratitude. "You did it, kid," she whispered. Word spread like wildfire. Neighbors, once dismissive, started knocking, asking for their own Suncrafters. Willow Creek began to glow again, not just with power but with hope. Then disaster struck. It was late July, and a brutal heat wave had pushed the power grid to its breaking point. A transformer exploded in an abandoned lot, sparking a fire that spread with terrifying speed. Dry grass and old debris fueled the blaze, and by nightfall it was a monster roaring toward the heart of Willow Creek. Smoke choked the air, thick and black, as flames licked at fences and crept toward homes. The community center where Ethan stored his prototypes and notes was in the fire's path. Families evacuated, clutching whatever they could carry. Sirens wailed, but the fire trucks were stretched thin, battling multiple blazes across town. Ethan and Mia sprinted to the community center where neighbors were frantically trying to save what they could. Ethan's stomach dropped, his prototypes, his designs, everything he'd poured his soul into was inside. Worse, the fire was inching toward Mrs. Delgado's house where the first Suncrafter was installed. If it went down, the neighborhood's hope would burn with it. The scene was chaos. Flames cast an orange glow, painting the night with terror. The heat was suffocating, pressing against Ethan's skin as he stood frozen, watching the fire advance. Mia grabbed his arm, her voice sharp. "We can't lose it all now." Ethan's mind raced. The Suncrafters in nearby homes were their only shot. They could power water pumps and hoses to create a fire break, but the units weren't built for such heavy loads. It was a gamble. If they overloaded, they'd fry, and the project would die. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rallied Mia, his dad, and a handful of neighbors, including Mr. Hargrove, who'd mocked him months ago. "We used the Suncrafters," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "We can stop this." The next hours were a blur of desperation. Ethan and Mia darted between houses, connecting Suncrafters to pumps, rerouting power, and troubleshooting under pressure. The air was thick with smoke, stinging their eyes and throats. Ethan's hands shook as he adjusted wires, the heat from the approaching flames searing his skin. One Suncrafter sparked, its circuits groaning under the strain. "It's not gonna hold," Mia shouted, her voice hoarse. Ethan climbed onto a roof, rewiring the unit as embers rained down, singeing his clothes. Below, neighbors hauled hoses, their faces streaked with soot, shouting over the fire's roar. Ethan's dad led a group near the community center, dousing flames with water pumped by a Suncrafter. For the first time, Tom looked at his son with something new: pride. The fire hit its peak at midnight, a wall of flame bearing down on Mrs. Delgado's house. The Suncrafter there was overheating, its battery pack glowing red. Ethan slid down a ladder, landing hard in her yard. He tore open the unit's casing, his fingers burning on the hot metal. "We've got one shot," he muttered, rerouting power to a single pump. Water sprayed in a shaky arc, barely holding the flames at bay. Mia worked beside him, her hands steady despite the chaos. "It's working," she yelled, but the fire surged, a gust of wind sending embers spiraling toward the house. Ethan's heart pounded. He could hear the crackle of flames, the groan of the Suncrafter, the distant cries of neighbors. Everything hung in the balance. Then the community center became the fire's next target. Ethan's prototypes were inside, along with his notebook of designs. If they burned, the Suncrafter project was over. Ethan made a split-second choice. He sprinted through the smoke, dodging falling beams, and burst into the building. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with ash. He grabbed the latest prototype and his notebook, his lungs burning as he stumbled back out. Seconds later, the roof caved in with a deafening crash, sparks exploding into the sky. Ethan collapsed outside, coughing, clutching his work. He'd made it by a heartbeat. As dawn broke, the fire was finally contained. Willow Creek was scarred, charred lawns, blackened fences, the community center a smoldering ruin. But it stood. Mrs. Delgado's house was scorched but intact, its Suncrafter still humming. Neighbors gathered in the street, exhausted, their faces smeared with soot. They looked at Ethan, the kid they'd laughed at, the gearhead they'd dismissed. Mr. Hargrove, his voice rough, said, "I was wrong about you, kid." Mrs. Carter, tears in her eyes, added, "You saved us." Mrs. Delgado pushed through the crowd, pulling Ethan into a hug. "This is your doing," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. Ethan's dad stepped forward, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son." The words hit Ethan harder than the fire ever could. Neighbors started clapping, a slow, weary applause that grew into a wave of cheers. Ethan, still holding his singed notebook, felt tears sting his eyes. He hadn't just saved homes, he'd given Willow Creek its fight back. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood rebuilt. Ethan and Mia salvaged what they could, using donations and spare parts to keep the Suncrafter program alive. The city, stunned by the community's resilience, postponed the rezoning. Ethan's invention spread, first to more homes, then to nearby towns. News outlets ran headlines, "Teens DIY solar generator saves neighborhood." Ethan didn't care about the fame. He cared about the lights staying on, the families staying put, and the block party that year, bigger and brighter than ever. Ethan Caldwell didn't start out to be a hero. He was a kid with a dream, a garage full of junk, and a heart too stubborn to quit. His Suncrafter didn't just power Willow Creek, it lit a spark of hope, unity, and a future worth fighting for. Now 20, Ethan's studying engineering on a full ride, but Willow Creek is still home. His invention powers homes across the region, inspiring kids who see treasure in what others call trash. Thanks for watching this incredible story. If it gripped you, smash that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Drop a comment, what would you invent to save your community? Until next time, keep dreaming big.